It's time to get serious about the weirdness out there. And that's why, after my two beloved hosts left Cosmic Cantina, I decided to keep my journalist integrity going with something I call Cosmic Intervention. I will cover topics from spiritual awakenings, esoteric knowledge, ancient civilizations, paranormal, and otherworldly beings, but in a new twist. Because, let's face it, if we've already heard most of these narratives before, we need an intervention when it comes to what might be going on beyond the veil. July 13th, 2024. Gunshots and screaming are heard at a Trump rally in Pennsylvania. A historic day in American politics, no matter what side of Trump fits into your belief system. Videos from body cams, professional cameras, and personal phones have been analyzed, but only a handful of people are talking about a video that was captured of strange spheres that were shown in the sky during this event. Now, before we fall into a government conspiracy rabbit hole here, I want to point out that there is an uptick of these spheres everywhere. They are shown surrounding planes, over military installations, haunted areas, or paranormal hotspots, even in plain daylight, hovering above us. Now, our technology might have gotten better, but there also could be the idea that they have been here forever. And if they've always been here, why are they here? Why do they seem to be monitoring us, protecting us, or harming us? My guest today, 10 years ago, was kicked out of the paranormal community for suggesting that these spheres were linked to an AI-based network, connecting each other and information. He then expanded his research beyond the paranormal and realized that the spheres were behaving the exact same way around all of our human activities. Now, government officials and Gary Nolan himself has said that this bloke from the UK has stumbled onto something truly profound. Tonight's show, we are going to dive into a topic we covered over 5 years ago on Cosmic Cantina. Get your drinks out, pull up a chair next to this compelling conversation on what you don't know about the spheres. Welcome everybody to Cosmic Intervention. Yes, Josh and Matt are not with me. They have left me at the bar alone, but that's all good because now I get to talk to really amazing people that are offering some awesome different perspectives on paranormal, aliens, ancient civilizations, and anything weird. That is what we're going to talk about here. So you have me and my guest today, Patrick Jackson. As you've heard in the cold open, he has been looking into these spheres for a very long time. And he was on the forefront of it before anybody else was. So with no other talk from me, Melissa, I want to introduce Patrick Jackson to the show.
Hello. Hello there.
Patrick, this is like deja vu. You know, people that are tuning into this episode, maybe you have not listened to all the Cosmic Cantina episodes, but you were one of our first interviews like over 5 years ago. When nobody knew who you were, and you had this amazing, this amazing data on these spheres. You remember that?
Yeah, and no one knew what I was talking about. That was the funniest thing. So yeah, it kind of was interesting. It was a kind of I don't know what else to say really.
Yeah, it was great. You you reached out to me, and I just immediately. I'm pretty good. You know, there's a lot of people that reach out to me with images and photos and all sorts of things, and they're all very interesting. But when you came to me with what you had discovered and what you were working on, I thought I'd never heard of this before, and this really starts to get into the bigger picture. So, without wasting too much time, let's get to know a little bit about you. Like, you know, you're the man in the shadows, if you will. Tell us how you got into this, because if I remember correctly, you were a complete skeptic. You weren't in the paranormal world. You weren't in the UFO, UAP world. You were just minding your own business as a reverse engineer.
Yeah. So basically my background is I'm in IT, and for a long time I was doing infrastructure, and now I do databases and development. And a big part of that is reverse engineering. And when I first had my first experience, it kind of woke me up a bit. And I just wanted to try and figure out if I can try and figure something out. I didn't really have it wasn't my intention to write a book or do anything. It was just really if I could figure it out. So what happened originally was I used to go down to the local village pub, and I was like on a big field, and I was just sitting there waiting for the pub to open, and it was like 7 o'clock at night during the midsummer, and I just looked across the field, and there was this guy standing there dressed as a monk, and I couldn't really believe it. I thought it was a guy, just having a joke or something. So I just shouted at him for a while, but it actually just looked like a black statue or a grey statue, but you could see all the detail. You could see him like a coat and like a big hood, and he looked like a monk standing there. And it was rather surreal. So at the time I had a laser pointer in my pocket, and I just pulled the laser out, and I remember the beam going on the ground and then up the chest, up his leg, on the chest, and into where his face was. And he had like a big hood over his head, and where the laser actually reflected off the area, but it was just like a big black mass. And
whoa,
that kind of got me interested, because I didn't know what it was, and I actually just got up and started walking towards it, and I got within maybe 10 feet, 15 feet of it, and it just dissipated into the background. And I never seen anything like that before, and it just kind of like woke my brain up a bit and said, oh, what's going on there? And I actually went to the bar later on, and I said, I think I just saw like a monk or something across the field. And they said, oh yeah, that's the mad monk, he haunts here. And I was like, what? What? So I'd never heard that story before, and I'd never seen anything like that before, and to see it so blatantly in front of my face for quite a long period of time as well. I think it went on for about good 3 or 4 minutes, and yeah, and then it kind of just kept bugging me. And as I was growing up and doing more in IT and stuff like that, I started watching all the mainstream paranormal TV shows, all the mainstream stuff, and none of it really gelled with me. I couldn't really understand what they were saying. It didn't really, the logic didn't add up in my mind.
And why doesn't the logic add up in your mind? Is it because it just felt like they weren't actually creating data or patterns around their findings?
Well, yeah, that, and also, I mean, why would a guy come back and stand in the middle of a field for 4 minutes and then disappear, and just stand there like a statue? It makes no sense. It's not normal human behavior. Humans are generally quite sociable creatures, so it's the behavior pattern didn't seem to match, and it just kind of. So I started watching all the mainstream stuff, and it was all the same. It was all the same patterns, all the same kind of experiences. By the end of the night, they found nothing, and they just then closed the show, and it went on to another location. And but it didn't make any sense to me. And I just I got to a stage, I think it was in 2013, 2014. I thought, I'm just going to give it a try and see if I can spot anything or notice any patterns, or just give it a try. Because at work at the time, I was like doing big projects, and I was doing all right at it. And what I do is nothing special. It's fairly common in the IT industry.
But I have to say, this is pretty common for people who have experiences, right? They're minding their own business. They're going on with their human existence, and then something supernatural, paranormal, alien, whatever you want to call it, happens, and they can't get it out of their mind. Did you think, now looking back in retrospect, 2013 was over 10 years ago, did you think that this happened to you for a reason, that you were supposed to look into it? The fact that it kept you up at night and you wanted to figure out the truth of what you saw, did you think in some way it happened for a reason?
I don't know if it was like I was supposed to see anything, you know. It was just, maybe I was just lucky because other people have seen it as well. Maybe I was just lucky, and it's the only time I've ever seen it, and the last time I saw it as well. I haven't seen anything since like that. And but it's definitely put me on a different path, because when I started working this stuff out, it's hard to explain, but so in IT, what I do is I generally create like a mental image of what is going on in the program or in the system, and then I can kind of model it, and then I can debug it in a way. So I can throw different kind of stress tests at it or different ideas at it, and then kind of work out virtually in my mind what's going to happen or how it reacts. And so I started doing the same thing with the paranormal, or predominantly poltergeists. And it was pretty brutal, because I used to wake up in the morning and it was like a machine would switch on in my head, and I would be thinking about it non-stop from 8 in the morning to 1 in the morning the same day, every day. It would be the major thought in my head, and I could feel different ideas being thrown at like a machine. It was throwing different ideas at it and modeling it, and then going, no, it doesn't work, and then discarding it and come up with another one. And so what happened was I came up with a few ideas what poltergeist activity was originally. But once I actually went to a place called 30 East Drive, which is the most aggressive poltergeist in the UK, those ideas disappeared very quickly, because I thought it was it may be some sort of quantum mirroring effect, something like that, where maybe there's some kind of data leakage from one timeline to another, or something, you know, a bit wooey like that. Mm-hmm. But it became very clear that it was actually interactive, and it was watching what you were doing. So it clearly wasn't like an error in the universe or in nature. It was actually something that is watching you and then reacts to it. And so
explain that in layman's terms. I mean, because people that do paranormal investigations will say the same thing. You know, something's watching you and they're reacting to you, throwing things at you, ringing bells, you know, hitting buttons, you know, whatever. But you're specifically talking about something else. You're talking about a different kind of response mechanism. Explain that to us in the paranormal field before we jump into aliens.
So the thing is that when I was doing my test at 30, within 15 minutes of being in the building, I just said a simple question. I said, "Is anyone here?" And straight away, the coal shed door downstairs banged 8 times, and we all went down there, and there's no one there, and it's a sealed door. You can't get into it, and so it was things like that. So I kind of knew that we were being watched, but I didn't know what was watching us or why, and I didn't understand the behaviors of it at the time, and it really confused me for a long time, because it just didn't make any sense. And it's understandable why the mainstream kind of believe that this is dead people and spirits and stuff, because they always kind of, you know, relate it to something that they feel comfortable with. But in fact, what I found very quickly was that the patterns that I was seeing were not human patterns, but machine-like patterns. And then what I realized was that you're actually dealing with a form of advanced AI. And in fact, now I've kind of got so good at it that I can trigger it on demand, pretty much.
So we're looking at 30 East Drive right now. This is one of the most haunted places in the UK, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
And then you built a device, correct, to trigger it, like after this experience, correct? So that's what you're talking about.
It took a little while for me to figure out what was actually causing it, but once I figured it out, one thing leaded onto another, and I came up with a code that you can run that will trigger a response. Yeah.
And then what was this code like? For instance, I'm not a coder, but is it are we dealing with a binary code? Are we dealing with I'll explain that. I mean, that doesn't seem very advanced to me. I mean, am I wrong?
Well, the way I look at it is like if it's AI, it can understand what you're trying to tell it. So all I'd done was I kind of figured out a language it understood, computer language that it understood. And then what I did was I encoded a message into it, and then I just looped it, and then converted the binary into sound, and then put that into an app. And then I got a team, actually, like a third-party team, just to go who were in there at the time, to try it, and straight away it started interacting within seconds.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. How did you come up with the code? See, this is where I think is really interesting with your backstory. You're a complete skeptic. You have this experience. You then that experience just cannot let your brain go, and you keep trying to figure out how to communicate with this activity that's happening in the house. And then you create a device with a code that then kind of irritates. Is that the right word? Irritates,
well, kind of. Yeah.
Whatever the energy is. And what you've noticed is that anytime that you, I'm just paraphrasing what you're saying, anytime that you play this code, that it irritates these spheres, and then you're able to capture the spheres. Is that correct?
Where you spot them, or you can detect the electronic emissions. So one of the main electronic emissions, what I detect a lot, is static, like a lot of static. It appears that the byproduct of a field-based propulsion system is static. So I designed these devices to sample the static in the area at the time, and then anything that goes above that threshold will then trigger like a light to go off or something. And yeah, here are the spheres. I mean, these are what I term as the Type 3 spheres. They're baseball-size Foo Fighters effect. They're the same things what we saw during World War II, except the ones in World War II are much larger. These are smaller variants that operate in all haunted houses. It's not just that East Drive, but it's all of them.
So for people just tuning in that are hearing this for the first time, or maybe they know a little bit about it. So you started with paranormal, and this activity is happening in a house. Now, you're triggering it, you're getting some response. So now you know you're interacting with something that you feel is maybe like an AI technology or some kind of technology that maybe is not human. But why is it in the house? Before we go into Foo Fighters and aliens and all sorts of stuff that's outside this house, why is it in this house? Like, why pick this house?
No, it's a good question. So what it is that the Type 3s, they operate like satellites in reverse. So like we use space to relay signals to, and then they relay signals across the planet. What's happening is that the spheres, the Type 2 and the Type 1 spheres, are relaying signals down to the Type 3s in the building, which are then in turn relaying along a path along other Type 3s in a row. If you look at the UK, for example, you'll notice that the most haunted houses in the UK are all in lines and clusters, which are of similar distance apart, which means that it's very similar to our own microwave-based communication networks. And it seems to follow environmental topology as well. So it works around topology, elevations.
So you've got three. You're saying there's three different kinds of spheres, and they all work together. And the ones that you found in the house are the ground, the ones that are kind of monitoring certain areas that are desolate, per se, because that house is, no one lives there, right?
That's right. But it's like any network. It has to go where it goes where it needs to go. So it doesn't always choose where it can go. It goes where it needs to go. So it's a lot like our own cellular network. Some people have, cellular towers outside their house. It's the same kind of thing. It goes where it needs to go. But what is happening is that they're using buildings to master electronic emissions. So what's happening is that most of the time they're dormant and they're in the house, but no one really knows they're there. And then they'll get a signal, they'll come online. And at that point, they'll start producing high energy emissions. And then when they start producing, they produce two types of emission. One is microwave and one is gamma ray. And then what happens is that when these gamma rays or microwaves get to such a point of energy levels, they will cause disturbances to move people away from the emissions. So it's actually in line with the inverse square law of radiation, which means that the further you are away from the radioactive source, the safer it is. So in the case of 30 East Drive, it bangs a coal shed door, like I said. And if you actually look at the layout of the house, you'll notice that it's actually the most furthest and most shielded part of the building, which is from where the sear is, which is in the attic.
So it's trying to push you to safety. So so basically they find a location, they've decided to put out their emissions because there's no one there, there's no humans there, no one lives there.
Mm-hmm.
It's an empty spot. Great. Now we can broadcast we're going to get to the other types of spheres.
Right.
And so we're doing our job. And then all of a sudden a human comes in to check out this poltergeist house, and it's like shuts it down. And then it gives off some kind of vibration that, I mean, this is where you have to explain a little bit more, where it either gives shadowy figures or it creates some kind of fear in humans to then back away.
Yeah.
So explain that a little bit. Like, how does it create shadowy, like the monk or these creatures, like these shadowy beings, or, you know, how does it do that? How does it create that? Or is that creating an image in our mind?
So when it actually causes things to move, what it's really doing is redirecting its propulsion system onto objects, which commits force. So if it's a door, it'll open the door or bang the door or knock something over or push something down the stairs. That's one way it does it. Another way is it uses, I suppose you want to call it like photonic masking, where it can actually, it looks like a black mass. It creates like a bubble around itself, and it creates like a black mass effect. So it's what people see mostly are them in the basements and attics of houses. So, and they look like a fast moving black mass that whizzes by really fast, like instantaneous acceleration and stopping as well. It moves in a digital way. And that's what it is. And people think that they're, you know, spirits or dead people and stuff, but really it's just a form of camouflage.
So this caused like a huge uproar. You came out with this hot on Facebook. I remember this, you know, 2013. People were not happy with you.
No.
The paranormal community was basically pretty upset because it makes it sound like everything they're working on is dog crap. So you got a lot of pushback for this. And
I got more abuse than I think anyone out there. But the thing is that I say to these people who, you know, the people who are celebrities and all that, I said, well, what have you figured out in the last 20 years of what you've been doing? Well, you've been doing this full time, 20 years. What have you figured out? And they just block you, you know, or they don't want to talk to you. They don't want to engage with you, you know. Really, what it is that paranormal activity is more of a religion than actual science. So as a result, there's a lot of pseudo sort of science behind it, and people will believe what they want to believe. You know, I can show someone my work and I can explain it and I can trigger it and I can demonstrate it, and then an hour later they're talking to spirits again. So I can't really help them.
I mean, I have a controversial question for you then. I mean, I think your work is amazing. We're gonna keep diving into how this plays into the bigger picture of where we are right now in the world, and maybe some of the stuff we're dealing with. But I mean, do you believe, just on a different level, do you believe that there could be some other kind of beings in another dimension of time and space that are also there, that, you know, not necessarily what you're talking about in this interview, but on another level, do you believe that there could be beings?
Yeah, definitely. It's just I just but what I focused on was specifically poltergeist activity, because all the behaviors are the same, all the patterns are the same. And the interesting thing is that you can measure poltergeist activity going back through history, and I think the first one was in the 4th century. So this is how long that these spheres have been here, since the 4th century.
I mean, as much as you know, they could be here longer. I mean, maybe
Probably
we'll find
longer,
a carving in one of the temples of Egypt, and it will be.
Exactly. But it makes sense for a lot of things though, because there's a lot of other effects. You see, like people who go into these buildings a lot, they suffer with headaches, they have fatigue, they have they feel tired, they feel sickness. It's and if you actually map all their symptoms, it's pretty much matches the same as low dose radiation poisoning.
Right. And that's something that in our cold open we've kind of previewed that Gary Nolan's really interested in your work, because he's noticing from his paper that he published I think a year ago now about how that there was a lot of people that had some kind of weird brain anomaly when they've had an instance where they've come in contact with aliens or UFOs or UAPs. So let's before we get into that, I'm trying to keep everything sectioned because your work is so detailed and so interesting. I just don't want anybody to lose the path here. So Patrick, you dove into this paranormal world, which they cut you up in little pieces, but you kept going. And you were not deterred. So how did you kind of started looking at the bigger picture, and you started seeing spheres not just in haunted houses, but you started studying UFO and UAP videos, and again you have the same spheres. So tell us how you transitioned from kind of looking at the bigger picture of not just the paranormal community and started to really look at the big picture of these spheres being everywhere all the time, everywhere from the Bible, World War II, and then, as we put in our cold open, just at the attempted Trump assassination. So how did you get into that transition?
Okay, so when you have a technology that is operating in a strange place, such as a house, especially a very exotic technology like that, you have to ask yourself, well, what's the purpose of it? And also, as I said, it appears to be relaying signals. In fact, we've sampled the signals already. And then the question begs, what are you sending signals to? So when you start hunting around the internet and you start seeing bigger variants of the same technology, as in you have a silver ball this big, and then you have one this big, and you have one this big, you think, okay, well, they all look the same, they all fly the same, they all seem to be the same technology, just bigger variants. So they must be connected, because obviously the people who are building the small ones are probably building the big ones. So then what you start looking for is patterns between them. And what I started noticing was there was a behavior, what I call the type 2 spheres. And the behavior of that is where you see a big silver ball, and it is basically sitting low in the sky, and it will sit there for maybe half an hour, and then it will just fly off. And then you see other examples where they will come across, they cruise from A to B real slow across the sky, or they're very fast, but they're always quite low to the ground. And that's the one.
Those are the type 3?
That's the type 2s.
Those are the type 2s. Okay, I want to play a video so people can see what a type 2 looks like. This is a type 2, correct?
That's correct, yeah. And as you can see, it sits in the air for a prolonged period of time and just very slowly moves or generally stays in the same spot. So when you see that, you think, okay, well, what's it doing? Because it's an unusual behavior to do. So the only thing it could be doing is relaying signals. Because if you've got the type 3s in the building, and if they're using directed microwaves, and we have detected microwaves and gamma rays, and 1.6 gigahertz coming out of the building as well, then it must be going to something else which is receiving it. And it couldn't be a high energy signal, because that would be a bit too dangerous. So it must be a low energy signal going from type 3 to type 2. unless, of course, the distance between the type 3 and the type 2 is so far that it needs a higher energy output. And that's when polydisect.
That was a video of a type 3, which
That's
we've
right.
been talking about, that are in the poltergeist type houses and stuff like that. And they're on the
That's
ground, relaying information from the ground up to the type 2s that we just saw.
That's
and
right.
then the type 1s are doing what? Because
They
they're all
create the V.
each other.
Yeah, they create the V formations that everyone's seeing in the sky at the moment.
So so how do the type 1s that are forming these V positions in the sky, how are they communicating with the type 2s and the type 3s? How does that all work together?
Yeah, bring up the diagram. So they have a microwave. They appear to have a microwave link between each of the type 1s. They are all connecting to each other directly. And then what's happening is that they relay down to the type 2, and then they relay down to the type 3s in the building. And the type 3s will then relay it to either the control center, wherever that is, or to other clusters up in the atmosphere. So it kind of like routes around and loops back up again. As a result, what it does is that because all the signals are away from the target that it's pointing at, from the target's point of view, it's actually undetectable. So in the same way our own stealth fighters will use satellites to relay their own signals and communications to, because it's away from the battlefield. So it'll go straight up to and across the sky. This is relaying downwards. As a result, they intercept and triangulate on these other UFOs.
And so this is crazy, because they're all in communication. It seems they're monitoring something. There's no reason for something to be on the ground relaying a message unless they are monitoring what's happening on Earth. Would you agree? I mean, that seems logical that this device would be monitoring on the ground, then sending up to the signal in type 2s, and then giving out direction to the type 1s. Am I correct by saying that?
So, as I said, the type 3s operate like satellites in reverse, but they use a thing called burst relaying. So they're not relaying all the time. It only comes online when it needs to, and then it starts doing its burst relaying, and then it's using the building itself to shield the electric emissions, which means that the network itself just blends in with background radiation. So from the craft, let's say 100,000 feet up in the sky, it just won't detect it. It just all blends in with background radiation. And then the next thing it knows is it's surrounded by spheres up in the atmosphere. That's how it rolls. And from what I can tell, the whole thing takes about 45 seconds.
Wow, 45 seconds. So how many of these have you been able to track, the concept of the relaying of the information, and then the kind of formation around a UAP or installation or whatever they're guarding?
There are I would say hundreds of videos now of the type 1 V formations. And then what you have in all the videos, you'll have the V formation, then you have the type 2 behind it. And you can always tell where the target is, because the type 2s will always be behind or in the safe zone, if you want to call it that. So if the target is up here, you have the V formation here, and you have the type 2 here. And then you actually might have another type 2 here as it relays across the sky, which or over mountains or over topology. And what it appears to be doing is that the type 1s are using a process called triangulation, where they're using 3 points to target an object in 3D space. It's like a mathematical process.
Wow. Okay, but why? But wait, we have an image queued up here. So is this what you're talking about here?
That's correct. Yeah.
Okay, so there's the 3, and then there's the kind of the relation. So tell me, break down the calculations of math. You know, I love patterns. You know, I produce code 12. Everything's in patterns of 3, 6, 9, 12. So here we have something paranormal, possibly alien, and we have this triangulation of 3, and you said it's a mathematical calculation. What is that mathematical calculation?
I'm not sure. I know the trilateration, but it's a big equation. I can't
or the equation.
Yeah, it's a huge equation. Well, that trilateration is a huge equation, so I don't have it in my head. But you can see the process pretty quick, quite easily. So you have like the type 2s there, which then talks to the type 1V formations. The triangle itself operates in a flat way, and it will move like this as one, or rotate in the air like this as one. And again, what it's doing is it's tracking the target and using those 3 points to get an exact position on it.
All right, so now the big question. We've kind of figured out, we've explained to the audience the spheres and the research you've done with the spheres and how they communicate, how they work together. All right, now big question. We are at a point in our civilization as humans where we are still debating if aliens are real or not. The government's now involved. There's tons of disclosure movements that are picking up speed and whistleblowers. But you're coming out and saying, yeah, all these strange unidentified craft are then being shown with spheres. You're taking it to the next level. You're saying, yeah, but a lot of them are whatever they are. If they're not man-made, nobody can claim them. They seem to be surrounded by these spheres. So the next question would be to you, why are these spheres surrounding UFOs and UAPs? What's your theory on that?
Well, it could be that the other groups just want something that we have. And I think that it's like any air force, by the way. It's like if say a Russian jet went into American airspace, they would triangulate on it, and they will force it to land, or they'll shoot it down. It's the same kind of thinking. It's basically access to the domain. So I don't think that they shoot everything down. I think a lot of it is that they'll go and check it out, and the other craft will just leave. They might just be passing, but then I think that there might be hostile ones that do get taken out. And in fact, there's a video there of one exploding, which you should look at.
There we go.
So here you can see this was filmed through a telescope.
We don't have the audio on this, but the guy is saying, I'm filming this planet over here. And then you could see these spheres, and then it explodes.
That's correct.
Hopefully we get to the explosion part. But I here it is. He's showing us his telescope he's using. He's pointing at the planet. He's pointing, this is what I'm focusing on. He's not looking for spheres. I don't think so. And we go into the camera and into the lens. And there's all these spheres.
You can see the triangle. You see the triangle there?
Yeah. Wow.
And that's in the horizontal config, which means the target is either above or below.
But
it's below, yeah.
But the target is a planet?
It's a craft.
It's a craft. Oh. Wow.
So what happens is that what you're seeing there is shattered metal, or it's atomized metal, as in it's now like in a liquid state. So what's actually happening is that's landing in our oceans. And there's now a lot of shipping companies that are now mining the ocean ocean floor, and they're finding lots of very exotic, very unique extraterrestrial-like metals.
Yes.
And they're hoovering up like no one's business.
Right. Well, are you talking about the ones that are producing oxygen on the deep ocean floor, or the ones that Harvard scientist is digging up in the ocean?
The ones that Harvard scientists are looking at.
Yeah. I think we have a picture of that, of Avi Loeb.
Yeah.
With his medals. So this is a big story, because we're still at a civilization point where we're arguing. Here's Avi Loeb. I'm sure if you're an enthusiast, you've heard, he's gotten money behind him to dig up the oceans, and he's been pretty exact on his calculations on where to go. So, you know, it hasn't been we haven't heard a lot of what's happening with Avi Loeb, but I'm sure he's digging up something pretty profound, and that's why we're kind of waiting for what he has next. But
by the way, you see the tiny sphere of metal on the right there. Metal takes that form when it's in a liquid state. It turns into droplets. So that was a droplet, and then it hit the sea and become a sphere.
Wow. Very cool. Yeah. Look how happy he is that he found that.
Oh, I would be pretty happy too.
Yeah. Well, we're going on an expedition, Patrick. We might just find that. All right. So let's get back. This is a huge story. So we have this system that's working on Earth to, it seems, protect us from not only getting harmed by their electromagnetic energy, their radiation that they're giving off on their ground software, but also to protect us from things also not human, right? We don't know who created this technology, this system that's monitoring our planet, but other things that are coming in from other dimensions of time and space, they're also protecting us from that. I mean, that's crazy. So who do you think built this monitoring technology system that seems to have been with us since the beginning of time?
Well, when I was doing my research for Study Stripe, I saw an image of a guy which was caught by accident, and you see this guy with an elongated head, like his head goes back like this, and the only place that you kind of see that is in the pyramids, in the Egyptian depictions. So I kind of think it wouldn't surprise me if it was the same group that built the pyramids are still here. It's just they live somewhere else.
Right.
Probably
and you think maybe they live underground. You think that they possibly?
Think so, yeah.
I mean, there's lots of ancient stories of beings that live underground. Obviously, I've covered lots of ancient civilization stories where we talk about elongated heads and those beings, and people have lots of ideas where they came from. Why do you feel that they're underground? What would be the purpose of having something monitoring us from above if they're underground?
Well, if they live here and they've lived here for a long time, it's highly likely that they would be underground, because living underground is actually quite beneficial, because obviously you're immune to any kind of environmental changes or catastrophe or huge events, natural events. And also, I mean, the images in the video that I got from my test, you kind of see a guy with very large eyes, which is actually entering the woodland where I was. It was actually taken through a tunnel entering the woodland rather than leaving, and which would suggest to me that they live in the woodland underground.
Right.
Now, if you have a group or a high IQ group that lives underground, and let's say that they created us in history, and let's say they have an IQ level around 300, and we have an IQ of 100, you have to ask yourself, well, what's the point of genetically modifying a primate or blending with a primate? What would be the point of it? And then you say to yourself, okay, well, what does the primate have? And it's like, well, he's got huge strength, highly survivable, very fast, and very strong very quickly from birth. And if we were in some sort of war situation, that is what you would probably do. If you were advanced species, you would blend your DNA with a primate, and creating basically like a super soldier. In effect, it would be like I suspect that human being Gen 1 was more of a primate than what you see today, but probably could take orders. And I think that's probably what occurred.
Yeah. I mean, you're not alone in the theory. I'm obviously not attached to what your research is, and this is new, but there's that idea of the missing link. There's the idea of you know, some kind of beings came down here and genetically altered us for a reason, whether it was to mine gold or to make us useful to them. I mean, that would make sense. But it feels that they're kind of muddling with what we're doing, and you know, what would be the point of that? And look, I don't want to fall into too big of a government conspiracy situation here with the Trump attempted assassination video, but why are they monitoring these kinds of things? Okay, so they've created a super soldier and they're supposed to be running around somehow guarding the gates, if you will, for their safe haven underground, because maybe something happened to their species and now they're living here and they're not leaving and they're staying underground. Okay, fine. And then there's somehow, but what would be the point of meddling in our affairs if that's what they're doing? If besides other alien groups coming in, what would be the point of them figuring out what we're doing with politics or even our own evolution? I mean, do they not want us to be too evolved? Do they want us to
I don't know. I mean,
what are your thoughts on that?
I mean, all you can do is look at history, and what you spot is where civilizations rise and they suddenly fall. And you have to ask yourself why. I mean, is it engineered or is it just by nature? I don't know. But what I could say is that they seem to engage nuclear weapons quite a lot. And the only reason I can say that they would do that is if we are indeed like the guardians of their gates, they don't want too many of their own foot soldiers to die. So they don't mind the odd little war here and there, or a few thousand people, or even a few million people dying, but they don't want it on a massive scale. So they would disable nuclear weapons, but let us have our own little skirmishes here and there. And that's what I think is kind of going on. I mean, I can't prove it, but that's my general feeling on it. It's like saying you've got 8 billion guard dogs guarding your castle, and 1 billion of them die through their own internal battles and wars. And from their perspective, it's like, well, there's still 7 billion there to guard the gates, so it's okay. But if nuclear weapons were deployed, then that might be down to 20 or 30%, and that could be a problem.
Right, and we do see a lot of spheres that are over military bases and missile silos. I mean, it's definitely been also UFOs and UAPs as well. But okay, let's just say all this is true, and you've got this race that wants to survive, and they're really advanced, and they're monitoring us like Hunger Games on the surface, like guarding their gates. What about, so you have these different alien groups trying to intervene. Could these other alien groups trying to intervene with us, could they actually be of benefit to us? I mean, it feels like we're kind of, if what you're saying is true, we're enslaved by these people underground, or these beings underground. I mean, could these other beings coming from a different time and space actually be here to aid us or make us aware of our situation?
I don't know. I don't know. But all I can really kind of say is that you wouldn't fly all the way here unless you wanted something. And generally, it also species themselves are separated by IQ levels. So, for instance, a primate could never function in a human domain. You see, so it doesn't matter how much a primate will bang on the door of humanity, he will never really be allowed into it. He will never understand, our politics or technology or anything. I mean, the primate thinks he's king of the castle, sitting in his tree, but the human domain completely flattens that, and so there is no benefit for primates to enter the human domain. And maybe it's the same with humans and other groups, whereby there is no real benefit of us entering their domain. It might just be too much for us to process, too much for us to deal with. And I think it's maybe a mix and a blend of both, where the seers are doing a job. And I think the reason why we're seeing them so often now is because you've got to remember that the human race has been pumping out electronic emissions into space for a very long time. So that makes us very trackable. So
Right.
if one group just happens to hear us, which might want something that we have, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they're evil or anything, in the same way as we might want a part of a forest or a part of someone's land. We just take the land, or we take the forest, while all the animals think we're evil, but we're not. We just want the land, or and it might be the same kind of thinking. And the seers appear to be engaging these other craft and saying, you can't come in, or doing it by politics or by force.
But wouldn't they stop us from having the technology to be able to track them and see them? And now we're asking questions. Now we're not the ants in the ant farm, type of thing. We're becoming aware. Like, that cannot be part of the plan unless it is, because now you have this whole body of research. I always think I'm very big into talking about the simulation talk, and could we be living one, and all of that, because of all the patterns that we humans create and everything around us in a pattern, right? So we're speaking about this in a pattern, but one of the things that always comes up when I'm interviewing people about the simulation theory is, well, why is the simulation allowing us to ask if it's a simulation? Like, the simulation would just wipe you out for even thinking about that, because it wants to continue with the simulation. But for some reason, if all that's true, we're allowed to ask that. So the fact that we are allowed to have this conversation, that you're allowed to collect all this data from these kind of overseers, we're theoretically talking now, but what do you think that the purpose of that would be? To make us aware? Do you think that we actually are useful in some other way besides the guard dogs?
Maybe every group has been created for a reason or something. Everyone has to have parents of some sort, I suspect. Regarding the simulation theory, I think we probably do exist in one. A good example of that actually was from Elon Musk recently, where he said, we never dream about our phones or computers, even though we're always looking at them. It's like our brains can't, or the simulation itself can't create machines within machines. So, and I even tried it myself. Actually, I tried to dream about using my phone, and I got to the point where I could look at my phone, but nothing would work on my phone. So it's kind of like, as I said, the machine can't create a machine. It can only, and also what I kind of noticed is that your dream states are mostly read only as well. It's not like you can write to it. It's not, as I said, like when you flick a phone, that's read write, because you're writing back to the operating system. When in a dream state, it's kind of like read only, where you're just getting the information. You're not actually writing anything back. So that's kind of interesting, and it's and I think that's quite a common occurrence as well. People can't seem to process that in their dreams.
That's really interesting.
It could be a case of, we do live in a simulation. It could be we live in a three-dimensional simulation, or an atomic-based simulation, in maybe a 7D universe, something like that.
Yeah, we're being able to kind of rip the curtains back a little bit. How does the government feel about all your investigations? I think you told me that you've reached out to a U.S. senator, correct?
Oh yeah. Well, we gave her a paper about a year before the UAP hearings.
Who was it again? Who was it again?
Senator Gillibrand. Gillibrand. How do you pronounce it? It's one of the two. And we gave it to her, and in the beginning we yeah, we're going to have lots of meetings with her and all sorts of catch up and follow ups and stuff, and just went silent. Just the door shut. Even we went to her office and just wouldn't come.
I think you might have gotten too close to the mark.
Well, I mean, I've also heard from other sources who are kind of like in touch with the intelligence services and stuff, and they say that yeah, I think Patrick's pretty much nailed it. I think he's right. That's what the message was from indirect sources. But it will never go. You got to understand, it will never go official. There will never be any official thing from that, because you've got to remember that most of the world doesn't care about disclosure. It doesn't care about aliens. They're too busy living their own lives. And we kind of depend on countries that are very, very reactive in religious sense or in social senses. So there's very little chance of the government actually saying anything. Hence, when the spheres went public in the hearing, everyone stood up and said, "We don't know anything." But you see, the thing is that the spheres are. The thing is that the spheres are now seen every day somewhere, and literally every day, there's a new video somewhere, and it's always the same process, doing the same thing, and it's exactly as I shown a few years ago, and it's just silence from because it is a hot potato, it really is, and it's. But the interesting thing is that the formations are also seen in religious imagery as well, or depictions. Symbolism. Yeah, like you see there's like a 3 points in the sphere with Jesus holding it, and it's like, well, this stuff, as I said, if the type 3 spheres are responsible for poltergeist activity, you can measure it back to the 4th century. So this is how long.
Or even further.
Even further, yeah.
These are things that Plato talked about without getting into complete quantum physics. But the idea 3, 6, and 9 and 12 are significant in some kind of energy system has always been something that's been talked about, right? And I think, I really feel that you're going to figure that out, that you're going to figure out why the 3 need to be together and how that works in some kind of energy system. So, more to come, more interviews to come on this subject, but this is really fascinating. It's definitely heating up, and you're definitely getting universities and people to really take what you have seriously. And I'm really happy about that. Because it's been a long time coming. We've been talking about this for a while, and you've some fascinating research. And this only opens the floodgates for you to get more data to add it into your pattern system. And one of the things that I always think is important, I know there's a lot of journalists out there that only want to really fight for that one angle that they're trying to get across. But for me, I really think that the more evidence that we can prove that there's a pattern, whether it's paranormal or aliens or ancient civilizations or whatever, I think that we have more grounds to actually speak about some kind of truth happening. And to me, this is the most truth that I've heard about investigating paranormal activity and aliens in a very long time. So pleasure having you on the show. We're going to have you back because there's going to be new stuff coming out. I know it.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there's lots of things going on. I'm just glad it's finally coming out. It's taken me years.
Yeah, right. And I'm glad that the monk visited you in the park, because you would never be on this journey. And so for some reason,
I'll be doing something completely different. Yeah,
it's your journey. And most of the people I interview, they wouldn't be involved in any of this unless something would have happened to them. So that's pretty miraculous.
Yeah.
All right, Patrick. Thank you so much for joining us on Cosmic Intervention, a sobering experience into the paranormal and all the weird stuff. And I can't wait to see you again back on the show.
Okay. All right. No problem. Bye-bye.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining Cosmic Intervention. And more episodes coming weekly, monthly. Tune in. Bring your own alcohol, BYOB. And we will see you next time.